growing 4 times faster. The latest from our daily newsletter at podnews.net. The Latino Podcast Listener Report 2023 was published by Edison Research. Monthly podcast listening amongst Latinos increased by 52% since 2020, nearly 4 times faster than the general population, the data says. The Atlantic, the New York Times' sports publication, has cut back on local sports podcasts, but Neiman Lab says that the Atlantic has told writers they're free to relaunch their podcasts elsewhere and monetize as they see fit. Amazon has launched a self-service podcast advertising tool in the UK. The launch gives advertisers the ability to reach audiences based on demographics across Amazon Music and Wondery shows and third-party publishers, apps and sites via Amazon Publisher Direct. Audacy has skipped an $18 million loan payment. The broadcaster, which owns a number of podcast companies, has a 30-day grace period. It's talking with lenders to refinance its debt. Remote recording tool Riverside has launched a built-in teleprompter and a way to upload files to the service. AI voice clones are being used for misinformation in the Sudan civil war, according to the BBC. A TikTok channel has posted dozens of recordings purporting to be Omar al-Bashir, the former leader of Sudan, but they're fake, says the broadcaster's team. Kagi or Kagi or Kagi. Anyway, it's a paid-for, ad-free search engine. No idea how to pronounce it, but it's got a permanent podcasts tab, we notice. We link to what it looks like in our show notes and our newsletter at podnews.net. Links are to the Apple Podcasts listing for the podcast, not direct to the episode, unfortunately. The New Zealand Podcast Awards are open for entry. It's open to everyone across Aotearoa, regardless of size, audience or platform. You've until October the 26th. Meanwhile, across the ditch, Matty J and Ash Wicks have been announced as hosts for the Australian Podcast Awards on November the 21st. And do you run a podcast app, website or service? Have you had a legal claim for unauthorized image use for podcast artwork you're reproducing from RSS feeds? We are editor at podnews.net. We protect our sources and we'd love to hear from you for a story we're writing. And in tips and tricks today, in August, Elon Musk suddenly tweeted about a podcast. Downloads doubled, website traffic soared. But how do you turn that blip into a long-term boost? The host of the Explorers podcast, Matt Breen, writes what to do when a celebrity tweets your podcast, or indeed Elon Musk. And in podcast news, lots more today. Culture Kids podcast celebrating its 1-year anniversary. Ghost Scary Stories Daily is bringing you bone-chilling ghost stories throughout October until the scariest night of the year. They say that everybody has a podcast these days, even a British lord. Peer Review is the hilarious title of the podcast of Lord Marland of Odstock, who's the Conservative peer Jonathan Marland. He's interviewed a selection of other peers, giving insights into their often remarkable journeys and the expertise and knowledge they bring to bear in our legislative process, the podcast says. Pop Culture Graveyard has started with 4 spooky Halloween classics. The first show is out today, looking at The Nightmare Before Christmas. 100 Latina Birthdays is new from LWC Studios today. It's an original documentary podcast about Latina health and lifetime outcomes. For the first time, the German-language Manager magazine is accompanying its publication of the 500 richest Germans with a 5-part podcast. The first episode is released today. In case you're wondering what you need to make it into the list, you need at least 400 million euro, that's $421 million, to be one of the 500 richest Germans. And have you heard George's podcast? It's back with a new season exploring the African independence movement and the legacy it has left today. The show features innovative sound design and original compositions by longtime collaborator Bembrick, brought to life by the BBC Concert Orchestra at Abbey Road Studios. And that's the latest from our daily newsletter. To read all the stories and subscribe, we're at podnews.net.